The Pinkerton National Detective Agency established itself as a premier surveillance and intelligence body during the second half of the 19th century. Founded in 1850 by Scotsman Allan Pinkerton, the Pinkerton Detective Agency was once the largest private law enforcement organization in the world. Today, we're going to take a look at how the Pinkerton Agency laid the foundation for the modern FBI and CIA. But before we get started, be sure to subscribe to the Weird History channel and let us know in the comments below what other secret agencies you would like to hear about. Okay, so let's talk about the friend to honesty and a foe to crime. Allan Pinkerton, born in Glasgow, Scotland in 1819, was a political and social activist who was enough of an agitator to earn himself an arrest warrant in 1842. Not looking to spend time in the slammer, he and his wife, Joan, fled to America. They made their way to the Chicago area, where Pinkerton found work as a cooper, building and repairing barrels and casks. The Pinkertons eventually settled in Dundee, Illinois, where Allan set up his own cooperage. One day, while he was out chopping wood, he happened upon a group of counterfeiters. He captured and turned them in, which gave him some adulation in his community. Soon, people were asking him to investigate local crimes. In his memoir, Pinkerton recalled he was suddenly called upon from every quarter to undertake matters requiring the detective's skill. He was good at it and soon attained the role of Kane County's deputy sheriff in 1846. A few years later, in 1849, he became the first police detective in Chicago. In 1850, Allan Pinkerton, who was then a police officer in Chicago, Illinois, founded the Northwestern Police Agency with lawyer Edward Rucker. This group eventually became the Pinkerton National Detective Agency. The agency built its name mainly by working with railroad companies, providing services ranging from investigation and private security to the pursuit and capture of criminals. The Pinkertons, a moniker they adopted, quickly became the respectable choice for security in the Chicago area. By 1866, they would be so successful they were able to open branches in New York City and Philadelphia. After Abraham Lincoln became president in 1860, the agency impressed him too, when Pinkerton agents, including Kate Warne, the agency's first female private detective, discovered a plan to kill Lincoln in 1861. It was intended to take place while the president-elect visited Baltimore, Maryland, on the way to Washington, D.C. In truth, the case pretty much cracked itself when the would-be assassins, Cipriano Ferrandini, accompanied by the Palmetto Guards, openly discussed their plans in front of a disguised Pinkerton. Ferrandini boasted about how with his first shot, the chief traitor, Lincoln, will die, then all Maryland will be with us, and the South will be forever free. After hearing this, Pinkerton arranged for Lincoln to travel by secret train to escape the threat. Lincoln assumed the disguise of her invalid brother to avoid notice. The president-elect made it to Washington safely, and due to the detective agency's success, Lincoln hired the Pinkertons as a secret service of sorts during the Civil War. Kate Warne's life-saving plan, which required her to stay awake through Lincoln's entire journey, became famous, and the agency soon thereafter adopted the slogan, "We never sleep." Once President Abraham Lincoln hired Allan Pinkerton, he earned the wider political support of the famous detective. The Pinkerton Agency not only provided bodyguards to the president, but they also gathered military information on the Confederacy. To accomplish this, some Pinkertons disguised and planted themselves with the Confederate military. Even Allan Pinkerton himself took to traveling under the alias Major E.G. Allen as a means of gathering intelligence. As a fellow abolitionist, Pinkerton became close with the president, serving as both a protector and confidant. When the Pinkerton Agency hired Kate Warne in 1856, it was because she was a woman, not in spite of it. The Pinkertons were well known for tracking down thieves and infiltrating criminal groups, but Warne had a way for the detectives to increase their efficacy. Warne walked into the Pinkerton office in Chicago and told Allan Pinkerton about her particular skills to acquire information in a way men couldn't replicate. Pinkerton, who figured Warne wanted to apply for a receptionist position, was resistant at first, but also pragmatic enough to give her a try. Warne's skills weren't limited to stereotypical feminine wiles. During her first big case, she befriended a train robber's wife and obtained information about the location of his money stash. Pinkerton was so impressed by her results, he took to hiring women one step further and built a full female bureau of agents to work for the agency. Purportedly, there are no pictures of Warne because she was that good at her job. Sounds like we should do a story on that lady. Thanks to the work of Kate Warne, the Pinkerton Agency's logo became a large eye with the motto, "We never sleep." Then in 1938, a story by mystery writer Raymond Chandler, creator of the famous fictional detective Philip Marlowe, coined the term private eye. While the eye ostensibly stood for investigator, some have suggested that the Pinkerton logo may have been the origin or at least the inspiration for the expression. Eventually, other fiction writers picked up on the term and turned the adventures of various private eyes into a thriving literary genre. The abbreviation PI still exists today, although the romanticized image it evoked waned over time. Allan Pinkerton used creative and innovative techniques to investigate crime and gather information during the Civil War, including sending African Americans behind enemy lines of the Confederacy. For example, take John Scobell, a former slave the Pinkerton Agency recruited in the early 1860s. Scobell posed as a cook, laborer, and vendor, but also often assumed the pretense of a servant of other Pinkerton agents. The information Scobell supplied to the Union included details about troops and local conditions. As a black dispatch, Scobell played a vital role in the war. Sounds like we should do a story on that guy. After the Civil War, the Pinkertons continued to work for the government, but increasingly became the police force of the American West. Railroad companies in need of protection from outlaws like Jesse and Frank James hired the Pinkerton Agency. The James brothers and their gang robbed trains throughout the West during the late 1860s and early 1870s. The Pinkertons used operatives and detectives to try and stop them, but to little avail. The outlaws were ruthless. The bandits even killed a top Pinkerton agent, John W. Witcher. His body was discovered with wounds from famished wild hogs. In response, the Pinkertons attempted to be equally ruthless in their efforts, reportedly firebombing the home of the James brothers' mother in 1875. The agency's actions didn't catch the bad guys, but they did manage to maim their mother and kill her younger son. The Pinkertons also took credit for breaking up Butch Cassidy's Wild Bunch, helping drive Butch and the Sundance Kid out of the U.S. That duo fled to Bolivia, where local authorities allegedly took them out. By the 1890s, there were more than 2,000 active Pinkertons around the United States, with 30,000 reserve operatives in the wings. For comparison, the U.S. Army of the time had fewer than 30,000 men on active duty. The agency was so large, the state of Ohio banned them, fearing the agency could act as a private army or militia against them. By 1906, there were 20 Pinkerton Agency offices across the United States. Eventually, the Pinkerton Agency's complex methods and systems established the basis for formal government agencies. Organizations like the FBI, the Secret Service, and the CIA took on roles and duties once performed by the Pinkertons, who also functioned as the top information repository in the United States. The creation of the FBI and these other government bodies didn't finish the Pinkertons off, however. They continued to serve as the private investigatory arm of industrialists, bankers, and corporations. Companies increasingly hired the Pinkertons to bust unions, as well as prevent uprisings among laborers. By the 1890s, disputes were so volatile it was practically open warfare between workers and their employers, many of whom recruited the Pinkertons to defend their businesses. In July of 1892, the Carnegie Steel Corporation hired the Pinkertons to break up a strike in Homestead, Pennsylvania. The workers unionized and negotiated a 3-year contract in 1889, but the company endeavored to bust the union and impose new conditions. The head of the plant at Homestead, Henry Frick, shut out the protesting workers from the factory, causing a riot. The company called in a force of 300 Pinkertons to face 10,000 armed strikers. At the end of an all-day exchange, 9 workers and 7 Pinkertons died. The state militia later arrived to settle the entire dispute. After the riot, Pinkerton became a dirty word in many circles. Until his death in 1884, Allan Pinkerton remained active in his eponymous agency. He even went above and beyond in his efforts to capture Jesse James by using his private funds. After he died, Pinkerton's sons, Robert and William, inherited the agency and helped it grow to a massive size. Robert ran the New York office, where he focused on providing security at strike sites. Meanwhile, William headed the Chicago base and turned his attention to solving crimes. Pinkerton's grandson, Allan Pinkerton II, took over the agency in 1907. His son, Robert Pinkerton II, then inherited it in 1930. When Robert died in 1967, the family's leadership of the company finally came to an end. Today, a global security firm, Securitas AB of Stockholm, Sweden, owns the Pinkerton Agency. What do you think of the Pinkerton Detective Agency's work? Let us know in the comments below. And while you're at it, check out some of these other videos from our weird history.